The first German bomber crossed the English Channel on September 3, 1939. Within minutes, a British fighter rose to meet it. What intercepted that bomber would determine whether Britain survived the next 6 years. It wasn't what you'd expect. It was a biplane, the Gloucester Gladiator. Fabric-covered wings, fixed landing gear, open cockpit. Technology from the previous war facing the machinery of the next one. And here's what nobody tells you about that mismatch. For the first 18 months of the war, these obsolete biplanes were all that stood between Malta and annihilation. 4 gladiators, the island's entire fighter defense. They named them Faith, Hope, Charity, and Desperation. 3 survived long enough to become legends. But Malta wasn't won by biplanes. It was won by something that arrived 6 months into the war, something that changed everything about air combat. We'll get to that. First, you need to understand what Britain was actually flying when the war started. The Gloucester Gauntlet, already obsolete before the first shot was fired. But here's why it mattered. Every Hurricane pilot who tore apart the Luftwaffe in 1940 learned to fly on a Gauntlet. Every Spitfire ace who defended London started in an open cockpit, wrestling a biplane through stalls and spins. The Gauntlet wasn't a weapon. It was a filter. It separated the pilots who could handle chaos from everyone else. Then came the aircraft that actually had to win the war, the monoplanes. And the first one wasn't the plane that got famous, it was the Hawker Hurricane. August 1940, the Luftwaffe sends 1,485 bombers and fighters across the Channel. The Spitfire gets every headline, every poster, every piece of propaganda. But here's the actual math. Hurricanes shot down more German aircraft than all other defenses combined. Not just more than the Spitfire, more than the Spitfire. Anti-aircraft guns, and every other fighter in the RAF put together. Why? Because the Hurricane was built like a truck, fabric and tube construction. A mechanic could patch bullet holes with dope and fabric in a field. Spitfires needed factory time. When you're losing 3 pilots a day, the plane you can fix in 4 hours beats the plane that needs 4 days. The Hurricane kept squadrons operational. That's why Britain survived. But survival required evolution. The Hurricane couldn't catch the high-altitude bombers Germany sent after 1941. So Supermarine took the Spitfire's airframe and ripped out the Merlin engine. They installed the Rolls-Royce Griffin, 2,000 horsepower. The Griffin Spitfires could reach 43,000 feet. At that altitude, Luftwaffe crews were alone. No fighter could touch them except this one. The late war Spitfire didn't just improve on the original. It redefined what a piston fighter could do. Then there were the experiments. The aircraft that shouldn't have worked, but did, or almost did. The Westland Whirlwind. Twin engines, 4 20mm cannons concentrated in the nose. On paper, devastating. In reality, engine problems grounded it more than combat did. But when it flew low-level strikes against German positions in France, nothing survived its gun runs. 4 cannons firing simultaneously. No aircraft in 1941 could match that concentrated firepower. And then the truly strange one, the Bolton-Paul Defiant. Imagine a fighter with no forward-firing guns. 0. All its weapons were in a rotating turret behind the pilot. The theory, German fighters would attack from behind and the gunner would shred them while they closed in. The reality, Luftwaffe pilots realized the Defiant couldn't shoot forward and attacked head-on. Defiants died in catastrophic numbers during daylight. 60% losses in some squadrons. But here's what saved it. The Blitz. Night bombing raids where German crews couldn't see the Defiant's profile. Couldn't tell it had no forward guns. Defiants stumbled into their actual role by accident. They became night fighters. Not great ones, but functional enough to matter when radar-equipped bow fighters weren't available yet. Sometimes the wrong design survives because the war changes. Then 1943 arrived, and with it, the aircraft that made D-Day possible. Not bombers, not transports, the Hawker Typhoon. Originally designed as a high-altitude interceptor, it failed completely at that job. The engine was unreliable. The cockpit leaked carbon monoxide. Pilots were getting sick. The RAF almost canceled it. Then someone loaded it with rockets. 8 60-pound rockets under the wings. They pointed it at German tanks in Normandy. A Typhoon attack sounded like a freight train coming apart. German panzer crews crews called it the Jubbos, short for jag bomber, but they called the Typhoon specifically the Butcher Bird. After Normandy, German armor didn't move during daylight. The Typhoon owned every road west of the Rhine, but speed was the next problem. The V-1 flying bomb, Hitler's revenge weapon. It flew at 400 miles per hour, straight line, no evasion. Spitfires could barely catch it. Typhoons were too slow. Britain needed something faster than anything it had. The solution was already in testing. The Hawker Tempest. 435 miles per hour in level flight. Fast enough to chase down a V-1, pull alongside it, and either shoot it down or tip its wing with yours and send it into the channel. Tempest pilots destroyed over 600 V-1s in the summer of 1944. Without them, London's casualty count doubles, maybe triples. The Tempest didn't win the war. It won the last 100 miles before victory, when losing at home would have been unbearable. And while the Tempest was chasing robots across the channel, something else was taking off from RAF Manston. No propeller, no engine roar, just the scream of compressed air being set on fire. The Gloucester Meteor, Britain's only operational jet fighter of the war. It arrived in July 1944. Too late to change anything, too early to be truly reliable, but it flew combat. Missions against V-1s. The first jet-versus-jet engagement in history almost happened. A Meteor patrolling over Belgium nearly intercepted a German Me-262. They never met, but the fact that it almost occurred in 1944 tells you how fast the war was moving. Now shift theaters, from fighters to the aircraft that hunted at night. The Bristol Beaufighter. The Germans called it Whispering Death. Not because it was quiet, because you didn't hear it until the cannons were already firing. Twin engines, 4 20mm cannons, 6 machine guns, and air intercept radar. It could find you in complete darkness at 300 miles per hour, 4 miles away. Then it closed the distance and fired before you even knew it was there. Beaufighters sank more German shipping than any other aircraft in the RAF. Torpedoes, rockets, cannons. If it floated in the Mediterranean, Beaufighters hunted it. And at night, over Germany, they intercepted bombers. Heinkel 111s, Dornier 17s. The Luftwaffe lost hundreds of bombers they thought were safe in darkness. But the night hunter that truly terrified the Luftwaffe wasn't metal. It was wood. The de Havilland Mosquito, plywood and balsa. No defensive guns, no armor, just speed. The Mosquito was faster than most fighters, more maneuverable than most bombers, and built in furniture factories. When aluminum was scarce, Britain turned to its carpenters. The Mosquito did everything. Night fighter, pathfinder for bomber streams, precision strike aircraft, photo reconnaissance. It flew into Berlin in broad daylight, took pictures, and left before fighters could climb to intercept. Hermann Göring called it his greatest failure. The British build a wooden aircraft that every piano factory can produce, and it's faster than our best fighters. The Mosquito humiliated the Luftwaffe for 4 straight years. Then there were the carrier fighters. The Fleet Air Arms War was different. You weren't defending Britain. You were attacking the Italian Navy in the Mediterranean, hunting U-boats in the Atlantic, and eventually facing Japanese Zeros in the Pacific. And you were doing it from a flight deck moving in 3 dimensions. The Blackburn Skua, first British aircraft to shoot down a German plane in World War II. First British dive bomber to sink a major warship. The German cruiser Königsberg in Bergen Harbor, April 1940. Then it got slaughtered. Too slow, too lightly armed. Carrier aviation was moving faster than the Skua could adapt. So was the Blackburn Rock. Take the Defiance turret concept. Put it on a carrier fighter. Watch it fail even harder. The Rock proved, definitively, that defensive armament doesn't work on single-seat fighters. You need forward-firing guns, or you die. But the Fleet Air Arm wasn't out of options. They had the Fairey Firefly. 2 seats, long range, heavy armament. It wasn't fast, but it didn't need to be. The Pacific Theater was about range, finding Japanese carriers before they found you, sinking Japanese shipping, before it reached the invasion beaches. The Firefly did both. It fought from 1943 until the Japanese surrender, attacking targets the U.S. Navy's fighters didn't have the range to reach. And before the Firefly, there was the aircraft that did the impossible. The Fairey Swordfish, a biplane torpedo bomber, obsolete the day it entered service. Fabric-covered open cockpit, 120 miles per hour maximum speed. The Italians called it the string bag, because it looked like something held together with wire and hope. November 1940, Taranto Harbor. The entire Italian battle fleet at anchor. 21 Swordfish took off from HMS Illustrious. They flew at wave height, dropped torpedoes in pitch darkness, and crippled 3 battleships. Half of Italy's capital ships destroyed in one night by biplanes the Italians didn't think were a threat. The attack changed naval warfare forever. Japan studied Taranto and used it as the blueprint for Pearl Harbor. Then May 1941, the Bismarck, Germany's newest, most powerful battleship, loose in the Atlantic, hunting convoys. The Royal Navy threw everything at it. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers. Nothing stopped it. Then, in freezing rain and near darkness, Swordfish from HMS Ark Royal attacked. One torpedo hit Bismarck's rudder, jammed it. The Bismarck could only sail in circles. The next morning, the Royal Navy closed in and sank it. A biplane from 1936 crippled the most modern warship afloat. That's not luck. That's about the courage to fly into anti-aircraft fire in an aircraft that couldn't survive a single hit. But Britain couldn't build enough carriers or carrier aircraft fast enough, so they bought American. The Grumman Wildcat, which the British renamed the Martlet. Rugged, reliable, outclassed by Japanese Zeros, but good enough everywhere else. Then the Grumman Hellcat. American engineering at its finest. More powerful, more maneuverable, easier to fly. The Hellcat dominated the Pacific. And finally, the Vought Corsair. Inverted gull wings. Massive engine. Nearly uncontrollable on a carrier deck. The U.S. Navy initially refused to use it on carriers. Too dangerous. British pilots figured it out. They mastered the landing approach the Americans said was impossible, and the Corsair became the fleet air arm's most effective fighter in the Pacific. Now the bombers. The aircraft that carried the war to Germany. Early war, Britain had 3 medium bombers. The Fairey Battle, the Bristol Blenheim, and the Vickers Wellington. The battle died first. May 1940, Battle of France. Battles attacked German positions in daylight with no fighter escort. 60% losses. Some squadrons ceased to exist in a single day. The battle was withdrawn from combat operations by the end of 1940. The Blenheim lasted longer, but not much. Fast for 1939, hopelessly outmatched by 1941. But Blenheim crews kept flying. Low-level attacks against German airfields, shipping, rail yards, suicide missions, essentially. They knew they wouldn't come back. They went anyway. The Wellington survived because of one man's genius, Barnes Wallis. He designed the Wellington's geodetic airframe, a lattice structure like a basket. When flak or bullets tore through the fuselage, the structure redistributed the load. Wellingtons came home with holes you could walk through. The airframe held. Wellingtons flew more bombing missions than any other aircraft in the first 3 years of the war. But medium bombers couldn't win a strategic bombing campaign. Britain needed heavy bombers, 4 engines, 10,000-pound bomb loads, the range to hit Berlin and return. The first attempt was the short Sterling, 4 engines, 7-man crew, massive bomb bay. But the Air Ministry demanded it fit in existing hangars, so the wingspan was cut short. That limited its ceiling to 17,000 feet. German flak was designed for exactly that altitude. Sterlings died in horrifying numbers. Then came the aircraft that actually worked, the Handley Page Halifax. Reliable, versatile, survivable. It flew 75,532 bombing missions. It dropped propaganda leaflets, inserted agents into occupied Europe, towed gliders on D-Day. The Halifax did everything Bomber Command asked of it. But there's only one British bomber anyone remembers, the Avro Lancaster. The Lancaster wasn't just the best British bomber of the war. It was the most successful heavy bomber any nation fielded, period. It could carry loads no other aircraft could touch. The Grand Slam bomb, 22,000 pounds. Only the Lancaster could lift it. The Dambusters raid. Only the Lancaster could fly low enough, slow enough, and carry the bouncing bombs Barnes Wallis designed. Over 156,000 missions. 608,612 tons of bombs dropped. More than half of all bombs Bomber Command delivered. The Lancaster was the reason Germany's war production peaked in late 1944 and collapsed by early 1945. You cannot fight a war when your factories are craters. Then the aircraft Britain didn't know it needed until the war started. The flying boats, the short Sunderland, 11-man crew, 14 hours endurance, bristling with guns. The Germans called it the Flying Porcupine because attacking one was suicide. Defensive armament in the nose, tail, dorsal, and waist positions. Sunderlands sank U-boats in the Atlantic, rescued downed air crews in the Channel, and patrolled convoy routes for 6 years. If you ditched in the ocean and survived, a Sunderland probably found you. And the tiny one, the Supermarine Walrus, an ungainly pusher-prop amphibian launched by catapult from battleships. It looked ridiculous, but if your fighter went down over the Channel, the Walrus crew would land in 6-foot swells, haul you aboard, and fly you home. Walrus crews saved hundreds of pilots. No glory, no headlines, just life or death in freezing water. Now the Workhorses, the transports, the Avro York, derived from the Lancaster, the Armstrong Whitworth Albemarle, a failed bomber turned essential. Glider tug for D-Day, the Handley Page Harrow, an obsolete bomber hauling cargo across Africa. These aircraft didn't win battles. They kept armies supplied. They moved wounded soldiers to hospitals. They carried the fuel and ammunition that kept the front lines alive. And the gliders, motorless, defenseless, one-way aircraft. The airspeed Horsa, 30 troops or a jeep and artillery piece, towed behind a bomber, released over the target, glide in silence until you crash land in a field and kick the door open under fire. D-Day, Arnhem, the Rhine crossing. Horses delivered troops directly onto objectives. No parachutes, no dispersion. You landed as a unit, ready to fight. The cost was brutal. Gliders couldn't evade. If you were hit during the approach, you fell. No engine to save you. The General Aircraft Hamilcar carried tanks, actual tanks. 7-ton Tetrarch light tanks flew into battle inside a glider. Think about that. You're a German soldier at Pegasus Bridge, and a wooden aircraft lands in the field next to you. The nose opens, and a tank drives out. But none of these aircraft fly without pilots, and pilots don't appear. They're built, thousands of hours in trainers. The de Havilland Tiger Moth. Every Commonwealth pilot started here. Open cockpit, basic instruments, unforgiving. If you couldn't handle a Tiger Moth in a crosswind, you washed out. No second chances. Then the Miles Master, high-performance trainer, retractable gear, enclosed cockpit speed. This is where cadets learn to think fast or die. Then the Airspeed Oxford, twin-engine, multi-crew, navigators, bombardiers, radio operators, all trained in Oxfords. Tens of thousands of aircrew, built from farmers, clerks, teachers, forged in trainers, then sent to operational squadrons to face the Luftwaffe. And the result? September 1939. Britain is flying biplanes. August 1945. Britain has jets, radar-equipped night fighters, wooden bombers faster than anything Germany built, and heavy bombers that turned cities into rubble. 6 years. From obsolete to unbeatable. That's not just industrial production. That's a nation that refused to lose. Every aircraft, every mission, every pilot who didn't come home. They weren't fighting for headlines. They were fighting so the next generation wouldn't have to.